Welcome to the second part of the lecture on sustainable nature-based tourism, reflections from the Wadden area. And in the second part, we will talk about this. We'll talk about this paper. It's based on this paper, Deep Feelings Around the Shallow Coast, Spatial Analysis of Tourism Jobs and the Attractivity of Nature in the Dutch Wadden area. So it's about this contrast between jobs, the economics of things, tourism, and the attractivity, how that is experienced. And well, to start off, this is a picture of some seals in the Wadden area, and birds in the background, flying birds here, and it's the main attractivity of the one of the main attractiveness aspects of the Wadden area. It's its undisturbed nature. While from the economic side of things, you can see here, this is a map of the Netherlands. Within red, there's a lot of urbanization. By training, I'm an economist, and I work at the Department of Economic Geography. And so we talk a lot about in our work agglomerations and the benefits of agglomeration and why a lot of things are happening there. And you can see that the Wadden area it's leftover area in that system. Basically, there's hardly any urban centers there on the edges here. Leeuwarden, there, Groningen, there, then Helder, but there's no urbanization, and there's no role basically in the urbanized economy. So there's a zoom in here of that map. You can see here there's Binnen den Helder, and here Harlingen and Delfzijl. These are the bigger cities, although still very small in the Dutch urban system. Now, if you see where tourism came from, there's a graph here which shows the employment on the vertical axis, and for the island of the Schelling, which is sort of you could say a bit of it's actually in between. It's the central island of the five Dutch Wadden Islands, but it's also in a way it's not of the smallest, it's not of the largest, so it's also a bit in between in terms of size. And we see here trends in employment for a 100-year period. And you can see that at the beginning of this 100-year period, around 1900, here at the beginning of this graph, we had employment in agriculture and employment in fisheries. And then due to scale enlargement in fisheries, basically this went down in the island of the Schelling because the bigger shipping activity, they moved to the bigger ports, and the bigger ports went out on the Schelling. Agriculture remained as a sort of steady employment provider, and you saw in the 1930s tourism coming in terms of jobs. And at this junction here, where they're sort of roughly the same size, there were still, I think, 2 times a major economic reports which was saying, well, tourism, it won't keep up. Let's invest in agriculture. There's more future in agriculture in this area, so let's develop some of the nature for agricultural purposes. That was in the 50s, actually, early 50s, and but these reports proved wrong. Agriculture had the same development in terms of larger scale developments, and on the islands only relatively small scale agriculture can persist. While also you have the ferries, which you have to get your resources via the ferry, which is more costly than on the mainland. So agriculture is not competitive, has proven not to be very competitive on the island, and tourism was very competitive. So it became the major employment provider actually over this 100-year period. It's quite clear to see, and it's sort of mimics the TELC framework, but then in terms of employment. Of the which we saw earlier from Butler. Then this is a graph about the employment structure in the different municipalities which make up the Wadden Sea region. And they are from west to east. We see on the left side here the islands, and on the right-hand side the mainland coast municipalities. And there's two axes here, one going from down up here, the total employment from 0 to 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 to 30,000. And then here from top to the bottom, we see the leisure employment as a percentage of the total. So this is only 5% leisure employment as part of the total employment, and up to here is nearly 60%. So then you can see that on this left-hand side, where all the islands are, the share of the leisure employment in the total economy is huge. And here it's relatively, and the mainland coast is very limited. So this ranges from 5% here, 15% here and there, smaller municipalities. For instance, the Marne, where the Lauwersoog is, which is sort of the most developed area in tourism terms. But that's a huge contrast, right? On the islands, it's the main provider, and on the mainland coast, it's much smaller. And this is something we discussed earlier. This share in the economy in the regional labor market is very important to support government attention, to attract investment funds and that sort of thing. And then we see here the absolute employment on the Wadden Island, which is this axis actually. So this ranges from, let's say, 500 to 1,000 or 2,000, and then up to here. Texel is the biggest island, and there is some 5,000 people working there, 6,000, something like that. Overall, on all the Wadden Islands, the Dutch Wadden Island, and this was 2007, but it's not hugely changed in recent years. There's some 9,000 jobs. Maybe 8,000 now, or 10,000, but roughly that is that will be the number. And these islands are among the top destinations in the Netherlands for tourists, nature-based. It is top of the bill. You see the highest rents for summer houses, and you see many people want to go there, and it delivers 9,000 jobs. Now, as I said before, I'm an economist by training, and I'm very much not impressed by that number. 9,000 jobs. If you read through the Financial Times or the financial pages of your newspaper, you may easily come across on a daily basis this type of news coverage. You say, oh, Shell to cut up to 9,000 jobs as COVID accelerates green drive. It's a regular type of thing. And 9,000 jobs, it's very small. While that's the whole tourism economy of the major attractive island in the Netherlands. So you may wonder whether, and that's what this talk is about, whether jobs catch the importance, and whether the economy catches the importance of tourism in nature-based things. So let's try to approach it a bit more from a different angle, the appreciation. These are words from statements which people say why they like the Wadden area. And you can see the bigger the word, the more often it's mentioned. So Wordle, they call it. So beautiful nature, birds, sea, islands, space, dunes, peace, quiet, rest, water, silence. These are words which are associated with the Wadden area. We also did photo survey at some point, and the research on that, and this was the top 4 for the island of Vlieland, which is the most northern island, I think, of the 5. And these were very popular photos from a set where people could choose from, and this was the most popular. And I think this is very telling in basically the emptiness of what you see here. You see a lot of sky, you see a lot of beach with some water on it, and if you just count the pixels or the survey surface which is covered by people, it's very limited. So to me, it represents a bit of sort of Adam and Eve type of picture. It's a lot of nature, and this is what people appreciate very much. And then if you think of what they actually do there, the top three activities which people do if they are here, they do walking, they do sitting, sunbathing, playing, watching nature. So all very, very natural and very, not no devices involved. What you might bring your mobile, but basically it is very, very, very natural and again quite Adam and Eve like. So you don't need Silicon Valley, you don't need car manufacturing, you don't need movies. This is what people like. They like to be out. They like to do walking, sitting, watching nature. So it's very simple life actually, and I think that's very important to realize that is this is sort of an ultimate thing, and that then to appreciate the simplicity of this ultimate experience. We also did research with the environmental psychologist Nora Davis and a few others, and in which we analyzed the emotional density for different areas in the Netherlands. And so people say to us in our survey, which I will show you later on, it's the Green Mapper survey. People tell us why they like a certain area, and then you might have emotions attached to that. Why you might say, well, I like the green, I like the beach, I like the forest. There's no emotion in that. But if you say, well, I like it because it's so open, or it arouses a feeling of connectedness, or I feel very quiet, or I think these are emotions. So we looked at the emotional density, and we saw that the share of emotion is relatively high in the Wadden area. You can see that also around 50 to 100% of all the markers, which of all the people that have marked the areas as the Wadden area as a favorite place, it's very emotion loaden, you could say. Very good. Now, what type of things do people say? This is from the paper Deep Feelings Around a Shallow Coast. And people say things like this: I've experienced a lot of freedom in an overwhelming nature. Pureness, peacefulness, wonderful nature, actually fantastic. I always feel like I can finally breathe, and I actually do, frequently and deeply. A place where you can be together with nature and the elements without disturbing anyone. And actually, I was kind of struck, so this is why I put them in this table by some. Not all quotes from all people have this same quality, but there were quite some quotes which had this deep feeling quality around them that I said, well, it's very important actually to write down and to be aware that this is the case. And being an economist by training, I was particularly struck by this quote: experience pressures in intense moments, both sailing and falling dry. Now, intense moments when you fall dry, this means that you throw out your anchor in the Wadden area on a shallow place, and then the tide goes away, and then your boat is out on a sandbank or on a mud flat, and then you're there, and you have to wait until the tide comes back and lifts your boat up, and you can sail again. And it's a huge experience basically. It's intense and precious. I think that's expressed correctly for many people. Many people, it's a life event, you could say. And then if you think about it economically, you're not even in a harbor. You don't pay anything. There's no economics involved basically. Well, you have to have a boat, obviously, and you have to get your drinks and food together. But at that spot, there is no economics involved. There's nothing being paid, no transaction, whatever. While from a well-being perspective, it's immense. So there you see in this one quote, you see that what I touched upon earlier. So may not be in the jobs. You don't see the economics do not express the value of what it means to people, this area. So, well, think it over and discuss among yourselves or with others. Think about this disparity where you see it in other places. You can think, for instance, in Norway, many people travel by camper. Now, a camper is an expensive thing to buy. Well, depends a bit on the type, obviously, but then you travel there, you see these wonderful fjords or forests or wherever you go to. There's hardly any economics involved. And that's something to realize and something to work with at some point, that there's a huge well-being involved, but very little jobs. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next part.